an Iranian regime convinced that the end is near and feverishly trying to build, buy, or steal nuclear weapons. It's a recipe for disaster. It's also raising intriguing new questions in the U.S. and around the world about the relevance of ancient Bible prophecies that suddenly seem as real as today's headlines. More than 2,500 years ago, the Hebrew prophet Ezekiel described a future war in the Middle East that Bible scholars have called the War of Gog and Magog. And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face toward Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. I will turn you about, and put hooks into your jaws, and I will bring you out, and all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them splendidly attired, a great company with buckler and shield, all of them wielding swords. Persia, Cush, and Put with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer with all its troops. Beth Togarmah from the remote parts of the north with all its troops, many peoples with you. And you will come up against my people Israel like a cloud to cover the land. It shall come about in the last days that I will bring you against my land.
One of the prophecies that most intrigues me in the Bible is Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, what Bible scholars call the War of Gog and Magog. Gog, we find out, is not a personal name. It's a title, like a pharaoh or a czar. Now, he is the leader over a territory called Magog. The Magogites, the people of Magog, are the people whom the Greeks called Scythians. These are the people group who settled north of the Black and Caspian Seas in what we now call Russia and the former Soviet republics. So what we're talking about with Gog is a Russian dictator, someone who's going to oversee Russia as they begin to form an alliance with Iran and a group of other Middle Eastern countries to attack Israel, to try to destroy or annihilate Israel in the last days. When you look at events in the Middle East through a third lens of Bible prophecy, sometimes dots begin to connect and you can begin to anticipate what's coming.
I think it's interesting that after Rosh is referred to, which can be almost indisputably proven to be Russia, then you have the Persia. Well, in 1930 is when they changed the name to Iran. It had been Persia up until that time, so we're still talking about the same place.
In the 2,500 years since Ezekiel wrote the prophecy, Russia and Iran have never had a military alliance of anything like what's developing now.
They have been close allies for some time. They have funded their weaponry. They have backed some of their policies. They have built reactors for them or are in the process of building reactors for them, nuclear reactors. So there is an alliance that certainly could trigger a movement.
I really believe that we are on the very verge of Ezekiel 38 being fulfilled and 39. I think that the alignment of the nations right now, Russia's support of Iran and of the other Muslim nations that are listed as the aggressors against Israel in chapter 38, it surely is all, the stage is set and the nations are in place.
The countries are aligning. Russia is one of the best friends of the Arab world right now. They used to be enemies, but now they're making friends because they've got a common interest. They want world domination. I guess the Russians have made them think they can trust them, and the Arabs think that they can have convinced the Russians that they can trust them, but I wouldn't trust either one of them. But it's going to be interesting to see how these two get together and go down against Israel, and then the world abandons Israel, and only God can save them.
There is a tension this world is feeling, an exasperation. We have tried everything possible, especially in the last generation, to see peace occur in the Middle East, to solve this Israeli-Palestinian issue. And we have not gotten any further down the road in terms of peace. In fact, I would say we've lost ground. And there comes a point when nations, when governments, when organizations who have tried and spent money, and lives have been lost in the process, finally give up. And they look for an expedient solution, not always the best solution. They're willing to try or do anything. And some nations, unfortunately, in the mix, are talking about a nuclear solution.
While they may or may not believe in the biblical war of Gog and Magog, even leading Middle East experts recognize the danger of the alliance that is now forming between Russia and Iran, an alliance that is forming for the first time in the 2,500 years since Ezekiel wrote his prophecy.
When you look at the whole development of the Iranian missile program, their procurement of cruise missiles from the Ukraine, it is clear that Iran is looking far beyond Israel and far beyond Tel Aviv. Their aim is the West as a whole.
They want to concentrate on completing their nuclear program, because once they have that, then they could threaten the West in ways that are unimaginable today. They could take over the Persian Gulf on all its sides and take control of the oil reserves of the world, most of them. They could topple Saudi Arabia and Jordan in short order. And of course Iraq. All your internal debates in America on Iraq would be irrelevant, because a nuclear-armed Iran would subordinate Iraq in 2 seconds.
The Russian interest, to my mind, is first of all to become back a player in the superpower games, to become superpower. And as long as they don't have positive assets to play with, they use negative assets to challenge the United States.
I was sent, in fact, by Israeli government, by Benjamin Netanyahu, to warn Russians about the dangers of leakage of that technology already in January '97. And in fact, I was the first minister who started this, and then I happened to be, I think, the first former prisoner of conscience in the Soviet Union ever who came back to visit his own prison, and then to meet the head of new KGB, Putin, and later the president, in negotiating insisting on the necessity of cooperation.
It poses a threat, in my judgment, in many ways bigger than Nazism, because Hitler embarked on a world conflict and then sought to achieve nuclear weapons, whereas the leading radical Islamic regime, Iran, is seeking to first acquire nuclear weapons and then embark on a world conflict. And that is what is not yet understood in the West, and certainly if it's understood, it's not acted upon.
This is Yad Vashem, the world's largest repository of information and documentation about the Holocaust. Over 6 million Jews were brutally slaughtered in one of the most grim periods of European history, including 1.5 million children.
Before and during World War II, Jews throughout Europe were the target of merciless state-sponsored persecution. In 1933, 9 million Jews lived in 21 European countries. By 1945, 2 out of 3 European Jews had been murdered. When the smoke finally cleared, the terrible truth came out. The Holocaust brought about the extermination of 1/3 of the worldwide Jewish population at the time. Following the German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, mobile killing units following the German army began shooting massive numbers of Jews on the outskirts of conquered cities and towns. Seeking more efficient means to accomplish their obsession, the Nazis created a private and organized method of killing huge numbers of Jewish civilians. Extermination centers were established in Poland. Millions died in the ghettos and concentration camps through starvation, execution, brutality, and disease. Of the 6 million Jews murdered during the Second World War, more than half were exterminated in the Nazi death camps, and the names Treblinka, Auschwitz, and Dachau became synonymous with the horrors of the Holocaust.
More than 60 years have passed since the Holocaust took place. Millions of pieces of evidence, documents, and photographs have been collected and are on display for all to see. It's difficult to believe, but there are still some who doubt or even deny that the Holocaust even took place.
One of the ironies of the rhetoric of Ahmadinejad is, on the one hand, he denies the Holocaust, and yet he seems to be calling for yet another Holocaust in order to trigger the return of the lost Imam.
Should he develop or buy nuclear weapons and match them with the high-speed missiles that he currently has, Ahmadinejad could do in 6 minutes what it took Adolf Hitler 6 years to do, and that is to kill 6 million Jews. And that is not his ultimate objective. He has said he wants to wipe Israel off the face of the map, but he's also called on the Muslim world to envision a world without the United States. And he said, is this possible? A world without America and without Zionism? And he said, yes, it is, when our holy hatred strikes like a wave.
The problem is lack of clarity in the West. Actually, Western people are sleeping. People in the West do not feel like they are engaged in World War III. But they are now attacked. They are under a jihadist offense. Only few leaders understand it. And we need to wake up. We need awakening. Otherwise, it will be too late.
This is the nightmare scenario, that the most radical Islamic extremist regime that is already the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, that is now fully entrenched in the most violent way in Iraq, killing thousands of innocent people, that has called for wiping Israel off the map, an end to the United States, that has this global Islamic rule agenda and believes in the end of the world, would now get the nuclear bomb.
If you look at all the operations from 9/11, the 10 airplanes, all these operations, there's one thing in common in all of them, and that is they want a grand finale. They don't want to simply put a bomb in a bus or in a mall. They want a grand finale. They want one operation that kind of cripples America once and for all.
As horrible as 9/11 was, experts tell me their nightmare scenario is for a single 10-kiloton nuclear bomb to be detonated right here in Washington, right by the White House, which could kill 300,000 people in a matter of minutes and destroy everything within a half-mile of where I'm standing.
Just imagine the announcement that there is a container ship afloat somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean containing either weapons of mass destruction or containing even short-range missiles. It would certainly set off a panic among many people. And if the United States was considering military action against Iran at some point in the future, and the Iranians could boast that they had container ships with missiles, this might forestall action by the U.S. or any of its allies.
You think that these people are normal. You think that Iran would conform to the conceptions of deterrence and careful calculation of cost and benefit. But in fact, it is part of that stream of radical Islam, in this case Shiite stream. But you've already seen what the Sunni stream does, which is to smash into buildings in Manhattan with collective suicide, to smash into the Pentagon with collective suicide. And there's no reason to believe that the militant Shiites, once they have atomic weapons, will not be suicidal.
This is the threat for all the free world, not for the one another candidate, not for one another country, but for all the free world to remain free.
Back in